Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books. Let's get started. Today we are taking a deep dive into this blueprint for extending not just how long we live, but how well we live.
That's the key, isn't it? The concept of Healthspan.
It is. And the source material we're looking at today presents a pretty radical new framework for thinking about this. The author's quest really starts from a very personal place.
It does. It starts with this incredibly arresting image, a recurring dream he had about catching falling eggs.
Right. He was a surgical resident at Johns Hopkins doing cancer surgery.
And he felt like that was his entire job, just trying to catch these eggs, these lives that were already in free fall, already speeding toward the sidewalk.
The ultimate frustration, you're giving everything you have, but you're always intervening too late.
Always. The disease is already there. It's already terminal in many cases. It's no wonder it led him to just quit conventional medicine altogether for a while.
But what's fascinating is what pulled him back. It wasn't a medical conference or a new study.
No, it was this moment of pure cognitive dissonance.
The famous not thin Peter moment.
Yes. So picture this. He's just completed this insane 14-hour swim from Los Angeles to Catalina Island.
He feels like an absolute champion.
Of course. He's standing there holding a cheeseburger and a Coke like a trophy. And his wife looks at him and just says, "Not thin, Peter."
Which is both hilarious and kind of brutal.
It was a wake-up call. Because despite being this elite endurance athlete, he ran his blood work and found out he was internally a mess.
Severely insulin-resistant, low testosterone.
And his arteries looked like those of a man 20 years older. He was only 36.
And that was the real catalyst, right? The realization that if he, a hyper-athletic doctor, could be so sick without knowing it, then the whole system needed a rethink.
A total recalibration. And that's where he gets to this idea of medicine 3.0.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because the reason we even need a new approach is that the way we die has fundamentally changed.
It really has. In 1900, people died from fast causes, infections, accidents.
Things that got you quickly.
Exactly. Today, we die from slow causes. The things he calls the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's.
And type 2 diabetes, or just metabolic dysfunction in general. These aren't quick. They are degenerative processes that can take decades.
And Medicine 2.0, our current system, it waits for the final event. The heart attack, the stage 4 diagnosis.
Right. It waits until the egg is about to hit the sidewalk. And that's what destroys the quality of our final years.
Which brings us back to that core idea.
Yeah.
It's not about lifespan, it's about health span.
The goal isn't what he calls the marginal decade, where your 70s and 80s are just a steep decline.
Like his example of Sophie, whose life just falls apart after a simple fall.
Instead, you want the bonus decade. You want to be hiking or lifting your grandkids or traveling when you're 85.
So it's a huge shift from reactive to proactive. And he makes the point that these shifts have happened before. I mean, think about germ theory.
Oh, yeah, that was a messy transition. Ignaz Semmelweis was basically run out of town for suggesting doctors should wash their hands.
So change is hard. But the key for you, the listener, is that in Medicine 3.0, you can't be a passive patient anymore.
You have to become the navigator of your own ship. You're constantly assessing that long-term risk.
Fighting against those three big vectors of deterioration: cognitive decline, physical decline, and the horsemen themselves.
So if that's the strategy, how do we actually do it? Where do we even start looking for clues?
Well, a good place to start is with the people who seem to win the genetic lottery, centenarians.
The 100-year-olds. And you'd think they're all, kale smoothie drinking marathon runners.
But they're not. The big studies, especially of Ashkenazi Jewish populations, show something completely different.
Many of them smoked, they drank, they weren't particularly health conscious, their secret wasn't perfect habit.
But what was it? Just pure luck.
It was delayed disease. They have genetic protectors that are just incredible. Things like APOE2, which is like a shield against dementia, or a gene called FOXO3.
Which is like the cell's master maintenance crew.
Exactly. So they get the horsemen, but much, much later in life, and they have a very short period of sickness before they die. They live well right up until the end.
So if you don't have that genetic luck, you have to create it yourself by controlling the mechanisms.
And that's where things get really interesting at the cellular level, with discoveries like the drug rapamycin.
Which has this amazing origin story, right? It comes from dirt on Easter Island.
Literally. Rapa Nui, hence the name. And what rapamycin does is it targets a pathway in our cells called mTOR.
Think of mTOR as the gas pedal for cell growth.
A perfect analogy. When you're eating, especially protein and carbs, mTOR is on full blast, telling your cells to grow, divide, build.
But if you dial it back, what happens then?
When you dial it back, you activate these amazing longevity pathways. The most famous one is autophagy,
Which literally means self-eat.
the cell's internal cleaning crew. It goes around getting rid of all the junk, the damaged proteins. This is why things like caloric restriction has historically been so powerful for health.
And that brings us right to the root of so much of this, the silent epidemic, metabolic dysfunction.
This was another one of his big wake-up calls as a surgeon. He'd open people up and see livers that look like they belong to heavy alcoholics.
But these people swore they barely drank.
Exactly. It was his introduction to NAFL, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the critical insight here is that you can't judge metabolic health by weight.
That's a huge one. We always assume thin equals healthy.
But it's not true. A third of people classified as obese are perfectly healthy metabolically, while up to 40% of normal weight people are metabolically sick.
Wow, and he has this great little evolutionary story about why we're so vulnerable to this.
The uricase silencing mutation. Basically, millions of years ago, our primate ancestors developed a mutation that let them convert fructose from fruit into fat with incredible efficiency.
Which was a lifesaver back then, right? To
Yep.
let you store energy for times of famine.
A huge evolutionary advantage. But today, in our world of soda and high fructose corn syrup, where there's never a famine, it's a complete disaster.
Okay, let's pivot to what he calls the most lethal horseman, cardiovascular disease. This is where his personal alarm bells really went off.
They did. At 36, he gets a coronary artery calcium score, a cake score, and it's a 6.
Which sounds low, but it meant he had the arteries of a 55-year-old.
Right. And what did the standard medicine 2.0 advice tell him?
Do nothing. Just come back in 5 years.
The perfect example of the reactive model. So he dug in and found the real culprit isn't just cholesterol.
It's the particles that carry the cholesterol, the ApoB particles.
Exactly. Think of them as the delivery trucks. It's not about how much cargo is in all the trucks combined. It's about how many trucks are on the road. Too many, and they start crashing into the artery wall and causing plaque.
And then there's an even more dangerous particle that's almost entirely genetic.
That's LPA. It's super sticky, very thrombotic, and it's what's behind a lot of those sudden heart attacks in people who look perfectly healthy.
Like the fitness expert Bob Harper.
A classic case. So if you're navigating your own ship, you have to know your ApoB and your LPA numbers. It's non-negotiable.
Okay, let's shift to cancer. The approach here is also getting much more sophisticated, targeting its core weaknesses,
And one of its biggest weaknesses is its metabolism. It's called the Warburg effect.
which is the discovery that cancer cells are just absolute glucose gluttons.
They consume it up to 40 times faster than normal cells. They're just ravenous for sugar. And this ties cancer directly back to insulin.
Meaning high insulin levels basically act as a cancer enabler.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. He shares an incredible anecdote about a patient, Sandra, who had metastatic breast cancer. She combined her targeted drug therapy with a super strict diet to keep her insulin rock bottom.
And she outlived everyone in her trial by years.
It's just an anecdote, not a study, but it's a powerful suggestion that the metabolic environment is crucial.
The other big frontier is, of course, immunotherapy.
Right, which is all about teaching your own immune system to see the cancer as an enemy, as bad self.
Taking the handcuffs off your T cells so they can attack.
Exactly. But for you, the navigator, the best defense is always, always early detection. Don't wait until you're 50 for a colonoscopy. He argues for considering it at 40.
Okay, that covers the strategy. Now for the tactics, the action plan. And he says the single most potent longevity drug we have is exercise.
The data on this is just staggering. Having a poor VO2 max, that's your peak aerobic capacity, is associated with double the risk of dying from anything compared to being in the top quarter.
Double. That's way more dangerous than smoking.
Far more. Fitness is not about vanity. It is fundamental to Healthspan.
So how should we train? I love his concept of the centenarian decathlon.
It's brilliant. Don't just train for tomorrow. Define 10 physical things you want to be able to do in your 90s.
like carry a heavy suitcase up the stairs or get up off the floor by yourself.
And then you work backward from that. That determines how you train today. The specifics are key, though. First, you need zone 2 training,
This is that lower intensity, steady state cardio, 3-4 hours a week.
where you can still hold a conversation, but just barely. This is what builds your mitochondrial efficiency. It's like tuning up the engine in every one of your cells.
And then for the top end.
That's your VO2 max training, high-intensity intervals. The goal here is to keep the aerobic capacity of someone 2 decades younger than you.
And of course, strength and stability are crucial. He highlights grip strength.
Which is bizarrely but strongly correlated with a lower risk of dementia.
And stability training, things like DNS, to prevent those catastrophic falls that often start the big decline.
It's all about moving properly and building a robust foundation that lasts.
All right, next domain, nutrition. This is where everyone gets lost in the weeds.
So much dogma. Keto, vegan, paleo. He argues we need to ignore the labels and focus on the biochemical targets. And for aging, he says protein is paramount.
Which is counterintuitive for a lot of people.
It is. But as we age, we develop something called anabolic resistance. We need more protein just to maintain the muscle we have. He suggests a target of nearly 1 gram per pound of body weight.
That's a lot more than the standard recommendation.
It is, but without it, all that exercise won't build the muscle you need to stay strong.
For carbs, he's a huge fan of using technology, specifically a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM.
Even if you're not diabetic, it lets you see, in real time, how your body responds to food. It takes all the guesswork out. You learn what spikes your blood sugar and what doesn't.
And for fats.
Prioritize monounsaturated fats like olive oil. Be careful with saturated fat because people's ApoB response to it is all over the map.
Okay, tactic number 3, the one we all neglect, sleep.
The unsung wonder drug. His own experience in residency being functionally drunk from sleep deprivation taught him this lesson the hard way. It's what led to his own old man blood.
He brings up Kurt Parsley's question. If sleep is so useless, why haven't we evolved away from it?
And the answer is it's absolutely essential. One bad night can wreck your glucose levels the next day.
And it's maybe most critical for our brains.
Totally. Deep sleep is when your brain cleans house. It clears out the metabolic waste, including the plaques linked to Alzheimer's. If you skip the cleanup crew, the garbage piles up.
So the sleep hygiene stuff is non-negotiable. Cool, dark room.
Cutting out blue light before bed. And the toughest one for many, cutting out alcohol.
People think it helps them sleep.
It helps you become unconscious, but it destroys the quality of your deep and REM sleep. You wake up feeling unrested because you are. It actively works against your goals.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most important domain, emotional health.
This is the foundation for everything else. He talks about the deaths of despair from opioids, alcohol, suicide as this invisible horseman.
And this section is just brutally honest about his own struggles.
Incredibly so. He talks about the low point after his son had a cardiac arrest, and he stayed in New York for 10 more days for important work, just completely disconnected.
It's a painful story. He links it to this idea of covert male depression.
From the therapist Terry Real, who has this profound insight that male depression often shows up as anger.
There's that amazing quote, 90% of male rage is helplessness, masquerading as frustration.
That really hit him hard. And he realized that fixing all the biochemical stuff is pointless if your internal life is a war zone.
So what were the tools he used to fix it?
Intensive therapy, specifically dialectical behavior therapy or DBT. It's all about learning to manage overwhelming emotions.
He talks about the distress tolerance window.
Right. Exercise, sleep, nutrition, they all physically widen that window so you can handle more stress. But DBT gives you the mental tools for when you're at your limit.
And it also taught him self-compassion.
He had to learn to silence that inner critic, his inner Bobby Knight. He realized longevity means nothing if your life sucks. The exercise, the nutrition, that's all just the scaffolding.
Why you're doing it, that comes from your emotional health.
That's the foundation that makes the bonus decade actually worth living.
It reframes the entire quest, doesn't it? It's not about obsessing over data points. It's about building a life that you actually want to live for longer. He leaves us with this final thought that this work isn't about becoming someone new.
It's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you so you can be who you were meant to be in the first place.
Which just flips the whole thing from a chore into a journey of discovery.
A fantastic summation of the ultimate lesson learned.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, spread the word.